Hello, everyone. Welcome to the inaugural episode of The Cart Barn, a new podcast dedicated to telling stories about golf in Alabama. I'm Chris Limley.
And I'm Greg DeWalt. And y'all might be wondering who the heck these two guys are and why are they doing a golf podcast? Well, basically, we're just two former college golfers from the University of North Alabama who love golf, and particularly we love golf in Alabama. Chris, just give us a little bit about your background and why you think the Cart Barn is going to be worth everyone's time to listen.
Sure, Greg. So, as you alluded to, I played golf at the University of North Alabama. I've been fortunate enough to play in a few USGA events over the years. And for the past 30 years or so, I've been in the pharma business and raising a family, trying to play golf as much as I can.
Well, you're one of the best amateurs in Alabama currently and previously. You were a much better college golfer than I was. I might have drank a little more beer than you did in college, but that's another story for another day. Um, but yeah, so you know, telling stories about golf in Alabama is why a good friend of mine, Dan Vukolich, and I started AlabamaGolfNews.com in 2020. I was a sports editor and sports writer for about 40 years at several newspapers, writing about all different types of sports. But, having played golf all my life, and it's a sport that's nearest and dearest to me, along the way, I've been fortunate to meet and write about some great people in the game. So I've played some great courses and covered a bunch of major championships. Hopefully, this podcast for me is going to be an extension of my storytelling. And one thing I think that's important is we know that golf landscape is littered with podcasts, a lot of great podcasts, and there's a bunch of people doing great work, bringing golf to the forefront. But what do you think is going to separate our podcast, the Cart Barn, from those?
Well, you're right, Greg. There's a lot of really good podcasts. I enjoy listening to podcasts and uh, but I'm not sure that many people really know how much history there is when it comes to the game of golf in Alabama. I mean, most recently, Alabama's gotten a lot of attention because of Nick Dunlap, who is from Birmingham. His family lives in Madison. He won on tour this year. He's won twice. One was the American Express, and he was an amateur. And he's obviously one of the fast rising stars out there. But there's so much more to the state's golf scene than just current tour players like Lee Hodges, who we'll have on the podcast, Trey Mullinax, and Robbie Shelton, and so many more. But over the years, there's been a lot of really great players that come out of this state. Some names you might be familiar with, and some you might not. But they set the stage for the golf that's here now. And then one more point of note about our history is the RTJ Trail, which I'm sure you'll cover some as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has driven me to start AlabamaGolfNews.com and now this podcast is just simply because local golf coverage has pretty much disappeared from print media. So this is a way to document some of Alabama's rich golf history, talk to some interesting people about that history, and get the word out about golf in the state. I think we can agree that Alabama has the most copied format in golf right now, the Robert Trent Jones Golf Trail in the country. You can't find a state right now that doesn't have some kind of a golf trail, but the RTJ golf trail is unique in so many ways and brought so much attention to Alabama. In the end, I think our listeners are going to hopefully be surprised at the quality and the quantity of interesting golf stories has to offer. And from that, Chris, why don't you tell some the people about what some of our guests are going to be talking about in upcoming episodes?
Well, sure, but I'm not going to give away everybody and all the secrets, but we do have some very interesting stories. And leading off our very first podcast will be Stuart Sink, who you and I have had the privilege of knowing for a long time and watched him as a young man, a kid, actually growing up out at Florence Country Club, working for the late Chris Burns, and some of the stories that he tells about those experiences. But also Tad Moore, a world renowned club maker who moved to Alabama And then there's, as we've already alluded to, the Robert Trent Jones story, Lee Hodges, Nick Clenard, who is the NCAA winning coach from Auburn earlier this spring, and many, many, many more interesting stories that I think our listeners will find fun and entertaining.
And I think one thing that's important for us to get out right off the bat is you're going to hear stories about people, places, and things in the golf spectrum as they relate to Alabama. You know, you're not going to hear us debating the Live versus the PGA Tour. You're not going to hear us debating whether the USGA and RNA are doing the right thing by rolling back the golf ball, unless one of our guests brings it up or it's pertinent to Alabama golf. We're going to, podcast is about golf in Alabama and telling the stories of, hearing the stories from the players' mouths, you know, who have grown up creating that history.
Well, I hope this preview of the Cart Barn has enticed you to keep listening. We want to have fun. We want to entertain you and spotlight on Alabama golf as we go forward.
I know I'm excited about the podcast launch. So much history that I wasn't aware of, and there's so many great stories out there. And we're also in the process of lining up some even more guests for future podcasts, and we're confident you're going to like hearing their stories. Thanks for checking us out. And, you know, if you've got someone you think needs to appear on a future episode, you can email me at greg@alabamagolfnews.com. And that's Gregg, Gregg, @alabamagolfnews.com. Thanks for listening.